I knew more drug dealers in China than I ever knew in the United States. There's at least one story that I wanted to tell in this video, but I probably shouldn't unless I'm convinced I'm never going back to China. So I have a twofer for you today. Two videos, both pretty short. They're each about 7 minutes long. One is for Korea and one is for Japan. And these concern a topic of controversy in that part of the world. I figured we kind of touched a little bit on the sex stuff in the last video. So today we're going to talk drugs. They're both from Asian Boss. They are about perceptions of cannabis in Korea and Japan. Now, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to get with these. I know what I'd get if they asked it in China. I have not found one yet for China. If I do, we will be revisiting this. I suspect that the sentiment is going to be similar. This is a part of the world, not just East Asia, all the way down to like the Philippines and even in the Southeast Asia up until recently. There's a long history of really strong opposition to drug use, and there's really no youth drug culture in a lot of these countries. These are not places where smoking a joint when you're 16 is normal. And in China in particular, and I'm sure we'll get into some of these things, due to the opium wars, people take this really seriously. So my expectation is, one, general negativity, which I could be wrong about. And two, that people are really not going to understand this plant at all. Now, we're going to go ahead and start with Korea. And there is something you should know for context before we start to watch this. These videos were both recorded, I believe, in 2017. And in 2017, there was a member of a K-pop band who was arrested for cannabis, and that was actually considered a pretty significant scandal. I know, in this part of the world, a rock star smoking pot is not a big deal. We assume they all do it. But in Korea, so we're going to see a lot of this video is going to be about their reactions to that in particular. So let's get on with it.
Hey everybody, it's Steve from Asian Boss. Recently, a member of a super famous K-pop idol group was involved in a marijuana scandal.
가장 먼저 이번 일로 저에게 상처받고 실망하신 많은 분들께 진심을 다해 사과드립니다. 어떠한 처벌이라도 달게 받겠습니다. 정말 죄송합니다.
Smoking marijuana is considered a serious offense in Korea. But have you ever wondered how the average Koreans feel about marijuana?
I should just point out, I looked this up, and I believe that individual did end up getting a suspended sentence. So, I don't know, I guess maybe he was famous enough to avoid the charge. Wouldn't be the first time that's happened. I'm sure it happens in other countries as well. Let's keep it going.
You're about to find out.
최근에 그 빅뱅의 탑이 대마초를 피운 혐의를 받고 있다는 뉴스를 본 적 있으신가요?
네, 있죠. 네.
그래서 어떻게 생각하세요?
안타까운 일인 것 같아요.
그리고 법을 어겼으니까 일단은 있는 법은 지키는 게 맞지 않나 생각을 하고는 있어요.
아무래도 불법이니까 좋은 건 아니죠. 하면 안 되죠, 사실. 그리고 또 빅뱅 같은 경우에는 사회 전반적으로 좀 많은 사람들이 알고 있잖아요. 대마초를 피게 되면
The public morality argument. So this is something that comes up in China a lot. There have been some scandals in recent years with the Chinese pop stars involving behavior that's a hell of a lot more serious than this, by the way. And one of these issues is, they're all supposed to be role models, more or less. They don't use the term, but it's the same thought process, which is something it doesn't seem to be as big a deal here anymore. When I was a kid, there was still concern over, like the youth-oriented actors and such being a good example for the kids. I feel like that's not as big a deal in our culture anymore, but it really is in East Asia. This idea of public morality among these famous individuals is a real big deal, and people can and have gotten into big trouble over it. People have had their careers ruined over it, so this is not a small thing. Continuing.
그 어린 친구들이 또 생각하는 게 우리도 해도 되겠구나 이런 식으로 생각할 수가 있으니까 또 그게 문제가 될 수 있죠 아무래도.
대마초를 피운 게 그렇게 심각한 일인가요?
대마초를 피워서 심각했다기보다는 대마초라는 것 자체가 한국 안에서는 이제 불법인데 불법 행위를 저질러 놓고 약간 죄를 뉘우치는 모습보다는 되게 어떻게든 죄를 회피하려는 모습이 실망스러운 거죠 사실은.
대마초를 만약에 한국에서 피우는 사람에게 어떤 처벌이 적당하다고 생각을 하세요?
처벌이요? 처벌 어려우네. 그냥 제 생각을 말씀을
본인 생각.
제 생각이
피우지 마세요.
한 2년 정도?
한 징역 한 1, 2년 정도가
Keep it in mind, by the way, and I didn't look really carefully into the story, there's no evidence he was trafficking. There's no evidence he was selling. This is just for smoking. So, 1 to 2... Okay. So, needless to say, there are certain things that I don't tell my students. Just to get this out of the way, I certainly have smoked cannabis before and used it in other forms. I don't really like it. It's a social thing. You're in a smoking circle. You jump in. I don't particularly enjoy it. I can't. My short-term memory's gone. I can't focus on anything. Cool, this is great. Nah, it's not for me. Other things are. There are other things I definitely would not tell my students above and beyond that. And frankly, there's at least one story that I wanted to tell in this video, but I probably shouldn't unless I'm convinced I'm never going back to China. Maybe I'll tell it anyway. Stay tuned.
당하지 않을까.
지금은 현행법은 어떻죠?
지금 현재 마약법에 따르면 대마초 흡연 지속적으로 일어났을 때 최대 10년까지 징역을 받는다고 하는데
거래까지 이루어지고 막 이제 대규모로 했을 때는 10년이 필요하긴 하지만 그냥 호기심에 한번 피워보고 이랬다면은 좀 선을 조절해야 되지 않을까.
약간 우리가 말리고 있는 것 같아요 지금. 더 낮춰야 한다고 생각하지 않나요? 생각보다 그런 것 같아요.
그렇게 법상으로 그렇게 나와 있으면 그만큼 위험한 수준이니까 대마초를 피웠을 때 그 중독성이나 아니면 다른 범죄율이 좀 심각한 수준이니까 그렇게 정해놓지 않았나 싶은데
거기에 대해 뭐 의문은 안 드시고요. 이게 왜 10년까지 되나?
굳이 의문이 들 이유가 있을까?
그만큼 그 심각성이 심하니까.
근데 저는 사실 그 교환학생 갔다 온 친구들이 많이 와가지고 그 외국에서는 되게 흔한 거라는 걸 알고 있긴 하거든요. 그리고 그게 그렇게 중독성이 심하지도 않고 생각보다 몸에 해롭지 않다라는 걸 알고 있기는 한데 인식 속에 이게 자리 잡기 전에는 좀 어렵지 않을까 그런 생각이 듭니다.
그 얼마나
So before we move on, I don't know exactly what the drug prohibition laws are in Korea. I have heard stories about people getting into trouble for things that they thought were illegal. I know on Erowid, if anyone's familiar with that site, someone has alleged, who was living in the ROK at the time, that they ordered Salvia divinorum, which used to be, I don't think it's that popular anymore. It used to be sold a lot as a cannabis alternative. They are nothing alike, aside from both being like leafy plants that you could theoretically smoke. But they didn't really know what the status, because salvia is kind of a funny old plant in that regard. And this person claimed that when they got their package, instead they received a letter basically informing them that the package had been intercepted and telling them that they were now going to have to go in for some kind of rehab program. I don't know if that's true, but the issue is if you're going to do things like that, especially given the punishments you've heard about here, if you plan on ingesting any potentially illegal substances in another country, for the love of God, make sure what the consequences are. Because, especially in this part of the world, they take this kind of thing real seriously. All right, this next part should be interesting. Continuing.
위험한 것 같네요. 대마초가.
그러니까 그게 위험한지 안 한지에 대한 인식도 사람들이 잘 모르는 것 같고 일단 그냥 마약 아니야?
모르면 이게 왜 위험하지? 그런 생각이 안 드시나요?
저는 궁금한데 보통 이제 많은 대중들은 그냥 마약이라는 그 단어 자체에 굉장히 부정적이라서 더 알고 싶지 않아 하는 그런 것도 좀 있는 것 같아요.
그냥 인식 자체가 없어요. 대마초라는 게 흔하지 않은 약물이기도 하고 미국은 좀 흔한 거라고 듣기는 했거든요. 근데 한국은 아예 그런 인식도 모르고 그 대마초라는 게 어떻게 생겼는지도 모르고
제가 듣기로 대마초 자체는 그렇게 담배보다 오히려 해로운 건 덜하다고 들었거든요.
그걸 굳이 불법으로 하는 이유가 뭘까요? 정부에서는 단지 어떤 보호 차원에서 그거는 조금 안 그런 것도 많은데
중독성이 강하니까. 그러니까 위험하진 않은데 중독성이 강해서 계속 이제 하게 되죠. 담배처럼. 담배도 한 번 피면 끊기가 힘들잖아요.
근데 왜 담배는 불법이 아닐까요?
그게 저도 좀 의문이에요.
근데 왜 이 대마초가
I've asked people, that same question in China, and the answer is they would never make cigarettes illegal because the government makes too much money off of tobacco. So much money made off of tobacco, which is why it's legal. Real reason. Continuing.
그래서 불법이라고 생각을 하세요?
그거 잘 모르겠어요. 왜 불법인지 모르겠어요.
그만큼 몸에 해로우니까
왜 나쁜지는 굳이 모르시고.
정확한 거는 저도 근데 솔직히 잘 모르겠어요.
그런 적은 있나요? 어떤 예를 들어 대마초를 피면 어떤 뭐 증세가 나타난다.
사람이 공룡처럼 보인다는 그런 증.
그거는 막 모르핀 이런 거야.
환각들이 있어서 불법이라고 생각하거든요.
근데 저도 지금 그런 말 많이 들었거든요. 계속 말할 때마다 환각 증세 하는데 대마초를 피면은 환각 증세가 나타난다는 거에 대해서 어디서 들은 거예요, 그거는?
평소 그냥 대중 매체에서 많이들 얘기를 하고 있으세요. 네.
그럼 이 법이
So technically, depending on who you ask, cannabis, or more specifically THC Delta 9, is sometimes classified as a really atypical hallucinogen. Again, depends on who you ask, but really, the thing about it makes people look like dinosaurs. That's a new one to me. Again, I'm not telling those kind of stories today. Let's just say that even like actual psychedelics don't do that. I know everyone's idea of what these things are like are from films and TV shows made by people with no experience, and let's just say that I can tell you that those depictions are incorrect. Continuing.
뭐 바뀌어야 된다 그런 의향은 없으신 건가요?
바뀌면은 지금이 문제가 돼서 바뀌어야 되는 건데 대마초를 펴서 처벌을 했다고 문제가 되는 일은 거의 못 들어봐서 사람들의 인식이 그렇게 바뀌지 않는 한은 굳이 바뀔 필요가 없다고 생각을 해요.
미국을 포함한 서양 국가에서는 대마초가 지금 합법화가 많이 되어가고 있고 그리고 이제 사람들도 전혀 대마초가 뭐 위험하다고 그런 인식을 안 가지고 있는데 그게 왜 서양하고 왜 한국은 좀 사람들 인식이 이렇게 다른 이유가 뭐라고 생각하세요?
그러게요. 그런 서양 쪽에서 대마초가 합법화가 돼가는 것도 잘 모르고 있어가지고 네. 되게 새로운 사실이네요.
모르셨어요?
네, 잘 모르고 있었어요.
다른 데 다 불법인 줄 아셨어요?
네.
이게 만약에 합법화가 되려면 어느 정도의 시간이 걸릴 것 같나요? 한국에서는?
5년에서 10년은 그 적어도 걸리지 않을까 싶어요. 저는 개인적으로.
난 더 오래.
다른 나라에 비해서는 훨씬 오래 걸릴 거라고 생각을 합니다. 최소 10년 이상 걸리지 않을까요?
10년?
네, 그러니까 인식 자체가 바뀌는 데는.
그럼 만약에 합법화가 된다면 필 의향이 있으신가요?
궁금하긴 한데 한 번 정도. 네, 뭐
법적으로 아무 문제 안 된다면.
네, 그러면 한번 좀 트라이는 해볼 수 있지 않을까. 근데 그게 뭐 인체에 해롭지 않고 진짜 기분만 좋아진다면야 술이랑 별반 다를 게 없으니까 필 것 같은데.
What are your thoughts on marijuana? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to Asian Boss for more authentic perspectives on the latest news and cultural trends from Asia. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve from Asian Boss. See you next time.
So, one thing you may have noticed in there is a lot of these misperceptions are coming from the fact that, again, there's just no youth drug culture in East Asia. So many of these people have no idea. None. They have no exposure, not just firsthand exposure, but even in the press. I do have one kind of funny story about that. In China, you see these they sell T-shirts. Like you have these random just booths set up where they sell T-shirts, And it's a lot of like old band shirts. Anything with English on it is really popular in that country. And they sell a lot of shirts with the 5-pointed leaf on it. And as far I've seen people wearing them, I used to see people wear them all the time. They don't know what that is. They don't know what that symbol means. So you have people walking around with the number one drug culture symbol right here, and they have no idea. So it is, in many ways, a very innocent part of the world. And unfortunately, that's one reason why they're so resistant in this area. All right, let's take a look at that other video. This is Japan.
Hey guys, it's Kay from Asian Boss. Your perception about marijuana or weed could be very different depending on which country you're from. Japan, along with many other Asian countries, have some of the strictest drug laws in the world. So we thought it'd be interesting to find out why this is and how Japanese people perceive marijuana. Let's take a look.
So I want to stop, before we go any farther, I probably should have started the video with this. There is actually a history of cannabis use in East Asia. As you'd imagine, I mean, it really is a weed. It grows everywhere. And in China, where it's called dama, it has a historical use in medicine. The way they do it is I think it was for treatment of, I think a couple things, but one of them was more or less insanity. And they didn't smoke it. What they did is they lit a fire. They had like a steam room going, and then they would throw the dama onto it. So they basically had people hotboxing. Now, I'm trying to remember if Japan also has a history of medicinal use. I think it does. But that's long since passed. Although as long as we're talking about Japan and drug culture, the Japanese islands are home to a tremendous number of psilocybin mushrooms, a huge number of varieties, including many with psychedelic properties. You used to be able to buy those anywhere, and now you can't. Continuing.
今日は、ある写真を見せるんで、それがまず何なのか教えてください。いきますよ。はい。これは何ですか？何に見えますか？
シソに見えます。
シソですか？
はい。
本当にシソですか？何だと思いますか？これは。
もみじに見えた。
もみじですか？
でもちゃう気する。ヤバそうな葉っぱに見える。マリファナ？
あ、合ってます。正解です。アメリカだったら例えば weed って言ったり weed ガンジャ。まあ、マリファナって、どうやって使用すると思いますか？
なんか粉にしていぶして吸うみたいなイメージなんですけど、はい、
乾燥させて炙るみたいなイメージ。
なるほど。
煙を吸うみたいなイメージ。
吸う。
タバコみたいにするやつですか？
吸う以外はありますか？
お香、炊く。
クッキーにしたりとか。
おやつで食べる、
クッキーにしたりして食べたりするんですね。要はその火に炙ることで同じ効果が出るんで別に食べても大丈夫なんですよ。じゃあマリファナってあの葉っぱを吸うと思ってますか？
それをなんか粉にしてる。
あれ実は葉っぱじゃなくて花なんですよ。あの花を乾かして乾燥させてそれがマリファナなんですよ。だから葉っぱを吸ってもあんまり効果はない。マリファナをまあその
Really going into detail here, but I hope from the last 2 minutes though this kind of uplift. I had not watched this video at all. I watched a little bit of the Korean one, and I didn't know we were actually going to get into, oh, do you know what the leaf is? But yeah, for real, in this part of the world, because there's no youth drug culture at all. None of this is in the entertainment made in that part of the world. Nobody has any idea. And when you have no idea, that can lead to it can lead to bad information getting around, which I do think probably later in this video, they're going to ask people what it is cannabis does to you. And I imagine that should be amusing. Continuing.
吸ってみたとしたら、どういう症状が起きると思いますか？
なんか気持ちよくなったり、眠くなったり。
麻酔の効果があるんじゃないですか。
川に飛び込む。
お酒とは違うでしょうけど、ある程度こう、酔った時に気持ちよくなってるのに近いような、それのもう少し快感が強いようなイメージですけど、
なんか楽しい気持ちになるとか、錯覚とか幻聴とかが結構聞こえたりしてしまうイメージが強いです。
友人から聞いたのはなんか気持ちいい感じ、なんか何もかもどうでもいいやみたいな、とりあえずなんかクレイジーになってみようみたいな、なんか笑顔が増えて、なんか違う自分がなんかこう出てくる感じになるらしいです。
これ全部友人をたどっての情報ですか？
はい、私はないです。友人です。
日本の社会って、マリファナについてどう思ってますかね？
身近にないから、なんかもうテレビの世界のイメージしかない。
公共の場で話すことも結構タブーというか、多分薬に関しては法律上ダメだから、
やっぱり違法だからやっちゃいけない、手を出して。
Yeah, you need to be really, really careful about talking about that. Again, I have stories I probably should not tell, just on the off chance it gets back to someone I know. But I will just say that I knew a lot of potheads in China. I've known a lot of potheads in the US too, because I spent quite a while living in kind of a college party town. You encounter it. But I will just say that I probably nothing. I knew more drug dealers in China than I ever knew in the United States. And that's just a fact. Even though it's such a bigger risk. The Chinese press, every so often you hear about some major like drug ring bust of foreigners, and then you look into the story because you're thinking this is going to be like some cartel thing, and no, it's like two people who are middling pot to their friends, and that becomes a major drug ring. So this is a part of the world, in case you are not getting this impression, in case you haven't figured that out yet, that is how negative it is. And I really suspect if they did this in China, I need to find one for China. It would be a lot worse than what we're hearing here. Continuing.
いけないみたいな。
覚醒剤とか大麻とか多分同様に扱われてる感があるかなって思います。
なんかそういう薬物っていうイメージが小さい時から教育されるから、マリファナとかコカインとか、ドラッグ全般っていうのが体に良くない。ですごいなんか人生をダメにするっていう。
日本人の理解としては吸ってはいけないもの、ただし一方でそのマリファナの効果とかを知る人たちは、タバコよりもマリファナは健全というか健康に関しては害さないっていう理解が一部の人たちではあったりして、でもやっぱり法律上ダメなので、
アメリカの半数の州がその医療目的としてマリファナを使用してて、でそのうち、アメリカの州の中で4つの州は娯楽目的で、使用が、合法化されてるんですけど、なんで娯楽として使用が OK だと思いますか？
精神的にちょっと病んでる方が多いから。
お金のため？
そんな危険じゃないから。いいとかいう報告も逆にあるからやと。
マリファナってタバコと同じように、そこまで危険性がないものって判断しているのと、警察自体がその取り締まりをしたり、プラスマリファナによって刑務所に入れるっていうこと自体が税金がものすごいかかるっていうのがあるんですよ、で膨大な費用をかけて規制してもその状況自体変わらなかったんで、だから税金の無駄遣いって思ってる州がそうやって合法化してるっていうことなんですね、逆にフィリピンのような国ではマリファナを使用したり売人だったら、すごい刑罰が重いと、場合によってはその死刑にされたりとか、それについてはどう思いますか？
死刑なりその、法律なりを設定するのはその国が、主導となってやってるので、
麻薬で何か事件が起きたらそれは
So we're going with a little I guess it's technically not cultural relativism because we're talking about laws rather than perceptions, but yeah, obviously I'm sure you've heard about again, this was in 2017, what the laws are like in the Philippines to this day. And I'm not sure what the specific history in the Philippines is. I've told you what it is in China. There were, 2 war. If you want to call them wars, the first Opium War was less a war and more the largest drug cartel shakedown in human history. It was a major part of what's now referred to as the Century of Humiliation. In fact, I believe it was the first part of that. And I don't know if anything similar happened in the Philippines. But in a lot of cases, it has less to do with the harm that's caused and more to do with historical perceptions. And opium really did devastate China during the Qing dynasty. So you can see why it is that they would have a stance like this, even if they're dealing with something that is far, far, far less harmful than opium ever was. Continuing.
社会的な問題ですけど、まあそれでもやっぱり人の命っていうのがそれに変えられるものなのかどうかっていうところの議論が多分大きくなると思うんで、ちょっとあれは日本人の感覚からすると行き過ぎてるかなっていうふうに思います。
なんかね、医療的なんでも使ってるって言ってたから、なんかそれにちょっと重い気はする。
もっと違う方法がないのかなって思いますね。で、刑務所ね、ものすごいいっぱいで溢れてるみたいだし。
いかがですか？
射殺はないよなとは思うけど、
アメリカは多分その刑罰を与えるっていうよりかは回復治療する方が多分進んでると思うんで、まあ理想的に言ったらそっちの方がいいかなとは思いますけど。
日本ってそのマリファナを合法化するべきだと思いますか？
興味があって、それはなんかある女優さんがその大麻を研究するためにとかって石垣島の方に移住されたりとかで、彼女がなんかテレビで医療用とかでも使われてるとか合法なところもあるって話を聞いたことがあるんで、その大丈夫な部分っていうかそういうのは知りたいなとは思います。
僕もまあ必要があるとしたら、確かちょっと前にニュースになった医療用でなんかもう靴を和らげるために使うっていう人がニュースになってましたけど、まあそういう目的がはっきりしていて、まあそれが拡散することもあまりないんであればいいのかなと思うんですけど、別に普通の一般市民のが生活する上では必要のないものかなというふうに思います。
アメリカの人とかは適度な適切な量とか分かってるかもしれないんですけど、いきなりこう日本でいいよって言われても乱用してしまう人とかいたりしたら、やっぱりそれが危ないんじゃないかなというふうに思います。
大麻にしろ、タバコにしろ、もちろん体に害を、タバコとかも体に害を与えるものっていうのは医学的にももう誰でも知ってることじゃないですか。そのなんか人の意識を朦朧とさせるものとか中毒性のあるものに関しては人間は摂取してはいけないっていうふうに僕は思います。
Alright, so there's your comparison. I guess they're a little more open-minded in Japan. Again, about what I expected, not a lot of shocks in there. Now I feel like I really do need to find if there's a similar video for China, because I can tell you that I spoke with people who said that they'd planned on living in other countries in the near future, and some of them, expressed a desire to get their hands on cannabis. Is this really forbidden thing? Because this one guy, I remember the way he was talking about it, it was like this absolutely just verboten thing that, oh, you've got to try it once and then never tell anybody about it. And meanwhile, over here, that's, whatever, a third of my graduating class and nobody cares. So I hope that this did illustrate a little bit of how the attitudes are different. There is a big cultural, the idea that, the Japanese can't handle it, to me is kind of ridiculous. I think most Japanese people wouldn't smoke it, but that is very much the view on anything perceived as a drug, even cannabis. So that's that for today. If you have any comments on, every one of you watching this has an opinion on cannabis, I'm sure. You can put it down there if you want. If you have any other videos I should take a look at, please let me know as well. Until next time, goodbye.